A quantum computer doesn't look or act at all like the computers that we use every day. It relies on different laws of physics to run calculations at super fast speeds. Tonight, Google is revealing a breakthrough in the technology that it says could ultimately lead to the discovery of new kinds of medicine or help grow our food more efficiently. Here's ABC's Elizabeth Schulze with a rare look inside Google's quantum computer.
In December 2024, deep inside a cryogenics lab in Santa Barbara, California, a Google engineer watched a chip called Willow finish a calculation in under 5 minutes. That same calculation, run on the fastest supercomputer currently operating on Earth, would take an estimated 10 septillion years to complete. That is a number so large it has no real meaning to a human mind. But here is one way to hold it. The universe itself is only about 13.8 billion years old. The math says the fastest computer humanity has ever built would need a span of time longer than the universe has existed, many times over, to solve the same problem Willow solved before most people had finished their coffee. This is not speculation. It is not a claim from a fringe blog or a YouTube channel chasing views. It is a published peer-reviewed result from one of the most scrutinized technology companies on the planet, and it represents a real milestone in quantum computing called quantum supremacy. The moment a quantum machine does something that a classical computer, no matter how large or fast, simply cannot do in any reasonable amount of time. But the speed record is not actually the strangest part of this story. The strangest part is something Google discovered almost by accident while testing how reliable their new chip actually was. And to understand why that discovery echoes something far stranger from more than a century earlier, we need to go back to 1899, to a wooden laboratory at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, and a man who was, by any measure, the most gifted electrical engineer of his era. Nikola Tesla arrived in Colorado Springs that spring with a deal in hand. The local power company offered him free electricity in exchange for the prestige of hosting his experiments, and Tesla built a laboratory unlike anything the town had ever seen. A tower rising 200 feet into the sky, capped with a massive copper sphere, stood outside the wooden building. Inside, oversized induction coils filled the room, and the air reportedly carried the sharp scent of ozone from the electrical discharges that filled his nights. Tesla's stated goal was to study the transmission of electrical energy without wires, a subject that consumed him for most of his career. But over the following months, he also built something else, one of the most sensitive receivers of electromagnetic signals that had existed up to that point, tuned to a range of very low frequencies. He spent countless hours simply listening, cataloging lightning storms from across the continent, solar activity, and the natural electrical hum of the Earth itself. Tesla was meticulous about this. He wanted to know exactly what the planet's background noise sounded like, so that if something unusual ever appeared, he would recognize it instantly. According to Tesla's own writing, something unusual did appear. He described detecting a signal that behaved differently from anything in his catalog of natural phenomena, a rhythmic, repeating pattern of pulses structured in a way that felt deliberate rather than random. In his own words, published years later in a magazine article, he said the signal carried what he called a clear suggestion of number and order, and that it was unlike any disturbance he could attribute to the sun, the aurora, or the Earth's currents. Tesla speculated, publicly and controversially, that he might be detecting an intelligent signal, possibly of extraterrestrial origin. This claim did significant damage to his reputation at the time. The scientific establishment of the era was already skeptical of Tesla's grander ambitions, and this speculation gave critics an easy target. Newspapers that once celebrated him as a visionary began treating him as an eccentric who had spent too long alone in the mountains. For much of the 20th century, this episode was treated as a footnote, an unfortunate lapse from an otherwise brilliant mind. It wasn't until 1996 that anyone seriously revisited what Tesla might actually have heard. Two amateur researchers, brothers Kenneth and James Coram, built a receiver modeled closely on Tesla's original design, matching his frequency range as closely as they could reconstruct it. Their work, along with research by other scientists studying natural radio emissions, pointed toward a compelling candidate: Jupiter's moon Io. As Io moves through Jupiter's powerful magnetic field, It generates strong radio emissions in the very low frequency range, emissions that, under the right atmospheric and orbital conditions, can theoretically be detected on Earth. This phenomenon, sometimes called Io-related decametric radiation, is a real and documented feature of the Jupiter system, discovered and confirmed by radio astronomers in the decades following Tesla's experiments. It's a plausible natural explanation for at least some of what Tesla may have picked up, and it would mean that if this theory is correct, he had unknowingly detected a radio signal from another planet's moon roughly 60 years before humanity built instruments specifically designed to listen for exactly that kind of signal. Whether this fully explains everything Tesla described is genuinely still debated among historians of science and radio astronomers. Some researchers think the Io hypothesis accounts for it well. Others note that Tesla's own descriptions, the counting-like rhythm, his certainty it was not natural, don't perfectly match what we know about Io's emissions, which tend to sound more like static bursts than an organized, repeating pattern. The honest answer is that we don't have Tesla's original data, only his written recollections, so a complete, certain explanation may never be possible. Now back to Willow. Alongside its record-breaking benchmark performance, Google's team made a separate and, in some ways, more significant discovery. They demonstrated a real breakthrough in quantum error correction, something the field has struggled with since quantum computers were first proposed. Quantum bits, or qubits, are notoriously fragile. They lose their information easily, a problem called decoherence, and for years, adding more qubits to a system tended to introduce more errors, not fewer. Google's team showed, for the first time, that, as they scaled up the number of qubits in an error-correcting configuration, the error rate actually went down instead of up. Physicists call this operating below threshold, and it is considered one of the necessary steps toward building a quantum computer that could run large-scale, reliable calculations rather than narrow benchmark tests. This is a genuinely exciting result, one that took the field decades to achieve, and it's a part of the Willow announcement that most quantum physicists consider the true headline, even if it doesn't sound as dramatic as 10 septillion years. There is no verified evidence that Willow detected any kind of external signal, echo, or communication from another universe. That specific claim, circulating in some corners of the internet, does not appear in Google's actual published research or in statements from its quantum AI team. It's important to be direct about that distinction, because it's easy for a genuinely remarkable real scientific result to get dressed up with claims that were never actually made. So why put these two stories side by side at all, if one didn't really involve alien signals, and the other doesn't really involve parallel universes? Because there is something worth sitting with here that doesn't require exaggeration. Both Tesla and the Google researchers built instruments at the very edge of what their era's technology could achieve. Both were searching for signals so faint, so far beyond ordinary experience, that almost no one else had the tools or the patience to look for them. Tesla built his receiver by hand, powered by borrowed electricity, in a wooden shack in the mountains, and used it to detect something that may have traveled across the solar system from one of Jupiter's moons. Google's team built a chip cooled to a temperature colder than deep space, using engineering that didn't exist even a generation ago, and used it to run a calculation that classical physics says shouldn't be possible in any practical amount of time. Neither man, separated by more than 100 years, was chasing a headline. Tesla was cataloging the electromagnetic behavior of the planet out of scientific obsession. Google's researchers were trying to solve one of the hardest engineering problems in modern physics. And in both cases, the honest, unembellished result was already strange enough to be worth talking about, without needing to invent a connection between the two that doesn't actually exist in the data. There are real, open questions in both of these stories, and it's worth naming them plainly rather than papering over them with certainty in either direction. We don't know with complete confidence what Tesla detected in 1899. The Io hypothesis is the leading scientific explanation, but it isn't proven beyond doubt, and Tesla's own account doesn't map onto it perfectly. It's entirely possible he detected a combination of natural phenomena and simply described them in the most dramatic terms his instincts allowed. We also don't fully know where quantum computing goes from here. Google and its competitors, including IBM and various research groups in China and Europe, are in a genuine race to build a fault-tolerant quantum computer, one that could reliably run calculations relevant to medicine, materials science, and cryptography, not just narrow benchmark problems designed to showcase speed. Estimates for when that might happen vary widely, and anyone who tells you they know the exact year is guessing. What we can say clearly is this. Two of the most capable inventors of their respective eras built instruments that let them listen to a universe most people never think about. One to electromagnetic whispers crossing hundreds of millions of miles of space, the other to the strange, counterintuitive rules that govern matter at the smallest scales we can currently probe. Both found something worth taking seriously. Neither needed a conspiracy to be remarkable. If you found this interesting, I genuinely recommend looking into Google's actual published papers on the Willow chip and into Tesla's own writings about Colorado Springs. The real versions of both stories hold up perfectly well on their own, without any embellishment required.